Serious, what is your most terrifying we need to leave now random rush of fear you felt? The time I felt a small shark delicately scrape my foot with its teeth in its effort to curiously figure out what I was. Like it literally felt like it gently took my heel into its mouth and I felt the barest brush of teeth all around my heel. It didn't break the skin. I didn't realize it was a shark. Murky water, until I reflexively kicked and felt its sharky skin against the bottom of my foot. It felt like a small shark, so a juvenile of some species or maybe an adult Atlantic sharp nose, not sure. My mom told me my eyes got huge and I looked at her like I wanted to nope right out of the ocean that second. I didn't go back in the water. Used to climb up to the Hollywood sign all the time. Took a bunch of friends there one night that had never been. This is in the late 2000s. Usually it's just an uneventful climb other than some fairly steep parts. This time was different. About halfway up I get a really weird feeling. Wasn't sure what it was. 2 steps later I hear this quickly repeating whistle-why sound. Unmistakable. I knew what it was immediately. I'd heard it once before in Northern California when I was in elementary school. I couldn't see it right then in the Hollywood Hills, but I'd seen the source of the sound clearly when I was younger. It was a freaking mountain lion. I put my hand out sharply, straight behind me with my palm open towards everyone else. They told me later that they could tell by how much my body language changed that it was really serious. I leaned backwards while not breaking line of sight with where I thought the sound was coming from. My friend leaned his chin up on my shoulder and I told him in the most calm voice I could to make everyone start climbing down very slowly. I think, because there were so many of us, we got away without incident. But the absolute stone-making fear I felt that night was intense. Going from laughing and having a good time to immediate silence and maximum sensory perception. It was wild. Never climbed to the sign again. In high school my buddy and I were riding our dirt bikes on the trails that ran around the logging roads in SWWA. Thousands and thousands of acres of undeveloped land with just gravel logging roads and trails. We were on our way back to the truck when we stopped at an intersection to figure out which way to turn. 3 dudes in overalls, no shirts and full face helmets rode out of the woods on quads. They rode a few slow circles around us then took off back into the woods. We booked the frick out of there. Turns out all that undeveloped land is also good for growing, cooking, and dumping. My car was stolen the very night I moved into my new house in a very good neighborhood. The neighbors had warned us that the neighborhood was being targeted at the time. They mentioned a woman around the corner that opened the door for knockers in the middle of the night and they attacked her and robbed her and almost killed her. We had reported the car stolen and did the police reports when it happened. Well, 2 nights later in the middle of the night I hear a knock on the door and they said open up. It's the police. Well, since I had heard the story about the other lady, I was suspicious and did not answer. I grabbed my kids and put them in my daughter's room because it had access to the roof from the window. I called the police to say that 2 men claiming to be police are pounding on my door. They said there was no police in the area and they're sending a car. Turns out, these same guys stole the car and came back for seconds. I did get my car back because they brought it with. How nice of them. Hope they brought it back with a full tank of gas too. When me and 2 of my cousins went camping with our family, probably about 8-9 years old, we stayed in a campground that had a playground near our spot. We would often go, just the 3 of us, to play and go back to our camper when it started to get dark because it wasn't too far. But one day we were playing and we weren't the only kids there, but this man, 40s, came up to us with a dog and started talking to my cousins and they were very trusting. He kept asking them if they wanted hot dogs or cookies and where they were from and telling us that his camper was just over there if we wanted snacks. This guy gave me a super weird vibe immediately, so I looked at my cousins after being quiet the whole time and said, I think I hear grandma yelling for us. Dinner is probably ready, and they argued and were confused, but after I gave them the look they just shrugged and listened to me. That guy gave me the heebie-jeebies and we never saw him again after that day. When I was a preteen, a strange man stopped and asked me for directions that didn't make sense. As I'm trying to help him, a van rolls up and the side door opens. I just booked it and never looked back. This was by far the creepiest thing to ever happen to me. It's a bit long, but bear with me. For context, I live only a few streets away from my workplace. This guy came to my floor one day for a team meeting. Ever since then he made a point to pass my desk when walking to the kitchen, which doesn't make sense logistically as the elevator basically opens right onto the kitchen. Keep in mind, this guy is a complete stranger. Nobody had ever seen him on our floor, so my work friends knew he purposely came to our floor just to see me. He would make excuses to be near me whenever I am in the kitchen. Egg to get a glass of water whilst I am washing my dishes. He was always alone, never spoke to anyone, only watched me. This happened for about 3 months. One day he happened to be downstairs at the time I finish work. He then knew exactly what time I finish and waited downstairs for me every day. He just sat there watching, waited for us to leave, then went back up. One day I walked out with a friend. We saw him sitting downstairs, quickly walked out of the building and parted ways, assuming he would go back up now that we'd left. Boy, was I wrong. My friend walked off in the opposite direction, leaving me alone. I had crossed the road and was just about to turn to the direction of my apartment when some higher power compelled me to turn around. The feeling that rushed over me just then, I had never felt it before. It was like a mix of all the most negative emotions in the world all swirling into one massive super cloud of fear. When people talk about the flight or fight response, this was literally the epitome of that. To this day I still cannot understand what made me turn around when I generally never do that. I was smart enough to go in a completely different direction so he wouldn't know where I live. He walked a short distance behind, crossed the road and checked to see where I was walking home to. Another male colleague happened to finish work at the same time this went down, followed him and waited to see what he was doing, stalking the stalker. He confirmed that he absolutely followed to see which direction I was going, and then went back into the building once I had walked too far ahead. He would have only need to follow me a short distance to see where I lived. This happened a few more times before I finally reported his butt and got him banned from entering all buildings associated with my company. Turns out he didn't even actually work for my company, external contractor, and shouldn't have even been in my building in the first place. Went to a movie on Halloween when I was in high school with my boyfriend at the time. It was a huge theater where there was a staircase all the way to the top row that opened in the middle of the row so you could sit on either side of the opening. My boyfriend and I sat in the back row on one side of the opening. We were watching the movie and around 30-40 minutes after the movie started, a guy walked in by himself wearing a big sweater and sat on the other side of the opening. He didn't really do anything at first, but he gave me a bad feeling and I felt uncomfortable, but I continued watching the movie. I noticed the guy seemed really nervous and wasn't paying any attention to the movie. I really couldn't figure out why, but he was stressing me out big time and I just felt like we had to get the frick out of there. I told my boyfriend that I was probably being silly but I wanted to leave. As we were leaving we informed the staff about the guy just in case. Turns out they had been looking for him as people had reported seeing a guy of that description behaving strangely in the parking lot earlier. The police came and he apparently had quite a few large hunting knives hidden under his sweatshirt. And that's why you should always listen to gut feelings. Our brains pick up things subconsciously that we don't. Good job. My mom and I were walking our dog on a semi-secluded dried up riverbed. For context, I was probably 7 or 8. A couple approached us, and instantly something in my gut told me that they weren't safe. The man asked some weird question like, "Is it just you and your daughter here?" and then proceeded to say that he took pictures of kids for a living and that he would love to have me model for him. I didn't wait to hear the rest of the conversation because after that I took off. And I'm ashamed to admit, left my mom and dog behind with the creepy guy. My mom was livid, saying how rude I was and how worried she was because she didn't know where I went, but the intense leave now feeling that came over me totally clouded any sort of reasoning. Don't feel guilty, you are the child and more vulnerable in this situation. Sometimes we must be rude to be safe. Predators prey on people's desire to be polite. One night when I was very young and at a bar, I got quite drunk. Some guy propositioned me to go back to his place and I was up for it. I left my car, cause he told me to just ride in since I had been drinking so much, and we went riding down the road. It was quite a ways, and I started to question him where we were going. He said it was just up the road on the river. He pulls over to the side of US 1 and points to a 2-story house on the river. It was very dark and the only light was of the moon. We walked down the dock to get to the front door. He gets in front of me and is playing with the doorknob, and as he pushes it open he turns to me and says, "Please don't make me turn the light on and let you see how dirty my place looks." So of course, drunk and stupid, I said no problem, and probably giggled. He guides me by the hand up a set of stairs. We get to the top and he says, "I just have a mattress on the floor, I hope you don't mind." And again, drunk and stupid me just sits down on the mattress, not thinking about anything. As I sit there in the dark, I start to get my vision becoming clearer. Everything looks off. The mattress has no sheet on it and I hear a whisper in my ear, "Get out." I jumped up. I ran down the stairs. I ran out of the door and down the dock. I ran across US 1 and up to a house that was across the street. I ran up to the door and started beating on the door and screaming for help. I turn and look and the guy is running across US 1 at me, chasing me. I start screaming more and more as now I'm afraid this house is abandoned. Right as the guy gets up about 10 feet away, the porch light turns on. The guy stops, turns around, and went back to his truck. Poor guy whose door I was beating on came out and saw me crumbled, crying on his porch. The sweet man got in his car and drove me back to the bar 20 miles away so that I could get my car. I never saw him again. I never even knew his name, but he saved my life. I know he did. Jesus Christ, this got me good, especially since I've been in the same naive yet optimistically inebriated state before. I was sitting in a park by my house at night with some friends when I got the sudden feeling to turn around. I saw a guy about 15-20 featuring behind us with his hood on and hands in pocket, walking quietly and with purpose towards us. I had been robbed at gunpoint before, so my adrenaline instantly shot through the roof. I stood up quickly and started moving away from him as I said, "Let's go now," to my friends, who kind of protested, and the guy stopped and said he just wanted to know the time. I told him nah frick that and let's go once again to my friends. We got the frick out of there with the guy just kind of standing there from what I recall correctly. Things get little hazy here because my adrenaline was really going, and I knew I needed to get out of there. Could have been something, could have been nothing. Point is, I'm still here. Always go with your gut feeling. Don't just go creeping about like that when they just wanna know the time. Frick outta here. My girlfriend and I were car camping in the woods, a nice spot by a rushing river. The evening had gone well and we turned in for the night. Some time later I wake up needing to pee. I do my business and head back to the tent. I'm sitting on the edge of the tent taking my shoes off when I see it. A vaguely human shape suddenly jumps out in my mind and I freeze. I stare through the dark at this shape, just silhouetted by the dim starlight, wondering if I'm seeing things or if someone is creeping on us. Then the shape moves. It rises up, becoming a larger outline partially blotted by the trees. My mind screams at me. I whip into action, reaching for my knife with one hand, while zipping the tent closed for some paltry barrier between me and it. It's then that I hear a noise over the rush of the river. Hey, wait for me. Apparently my girlfriend had come out after I did and I just didn't realize it. Good ending, but holy frick, I'd be scared crapless in the moment. Was at a rest stop in upstate New York near Troy around midnight. This was before cell phones and GPS, and we stopped to use the payphone to find a hotel for the night. On the way back to the car, a couple of random guys approached us from behind asking for directions. I told my wife to get in the car when I noticed two other guys coming towards the car from the opposite direction. I hopped in the car and drove away before anything else happened. Might have just been me being overly cautious, but I swear I avoided a mugging or worse by the skin of my teeth. Oh god, you had me at Troy around midnight. That is one depressing city. I remember visiting RPI and driving down a street of dilapidated houses and everyone was just sitting out on their porch staring at me like I was an alien. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.